Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
According to German Defense Minister Peter Strzok, the German forces, which are part of the North Atlantic Keeping Peace Forces, ISAF, will remain in Afghanistan despite the latest attack in one of their armored vehicles that killed one soldier and injured many others. Meanwhile, the Taliban movement claimed responsibility for two suicide operations that were executed east of the Afghani capital Kabul, killing 3 Afghanis and injuring 2 ISAF soldiers and many others.
The series of international suicide operations continued to plague many world capitals. The Afghani capital, Kabul, was the target this time. A suicide bomber drove a car packed with explosives into an ISAF armored vehicle, killing 1 German soldier, injuring 2 Greek soldiers and 3 civilians. Moments later, another suicide bomber struck, killing a woman and a child.
بعد قليل أودت عملية أخرى بحياة امرأة وطفل.
We were trying to secure the scene of the first incident when another suicide bomber struck. The second suicide bomber rammed an explosive-laden taxi into an ISAF convoy.
أقل من ساعة واحدة وبضعة كيلومترات.
The second attack took place on the same road leading to the eastern city of Jalalabad, less than an hour apart and a few kilometers away from the scene of the first incident. The Taliban movement claimed responsibility for the 2 attacks, confirming that both of the suicide bombers are Afghani mujahideen.
وتوعدت بهجوم ثالث.
These attacks are a living proof that the situation in Afghanistan is not stable or calm. Consequently, we must keep the international forces there.
الاستقرار ليس بالصفة التي يمكن أن تطلق على الأوضاع في أفغانستان.
The situation in Afghanistan cannot be described as stable or secure, despite the presence of international forces in the execution of many security operations since the toppling of the former regime of Taliban. 2 months ago, a suicide operation was also executed in the same area, killing more than 10 people. Most of them were Afghani army generals. Taliban is claiming responsibility on a daily basis for many sporadic attacks against American and Afghani security forces in the eastern and southern parts of the country. Many suicide operations in Afghanistan go unnoticed because most people are preoccupied with the security situation in Iraq and other catastrophic disasters. According to many Western officials, most of the suicide operations in Afghanistan are executed by armed groups such as the Taliban movement, Al-Qaeda, and supporters of Khalbadin Hekmatyar. Meanwhile, some Afghani officials offer a cooling-off period to members of the Taliban, but in return the armed group must surrender. The Afghani government criticized neighboring Pakistan of supporting the Taliban movement and supplying weapons to armed groups.
مقابل استسلامهم فإنهم يتهمون باكستان بدعم حركة طالبان ومواصلة مد مقاتليها بالسلاح لتدمير البلاد.
Neither the Afghani government nor the peacekeeping coalition forces, with their many security operations and efforts, were successful in maintaining peace and security in the country. I do not believe war is the solution. I think we must sit down and negotiate with these groups.
This comes one day after the Afghani president Hamid Karzai has invited the Taliban movement and other armed groups to lay down their weapons and their insurgency and support the initiative for national reconciliation. However, insurgents responded by unleashing another round of suicide operations.
14 people were killed in numerous attacks and assassinations in Iraq, including the so-called Green Zone in Baghdad. The American forces launched an offensive operation in the area of Ali Badi, on the banks of the Euphrates River near the Syrian border, killing 37 armed men. Amidst these military developments, a number of Iraqi officials confirmed that the coalition forces will start to withdraw their troops at the beginning of next year. However, Britain did not elaborate on that, confirming that the pullout will depend on the security situation in Iraq. During a meeting with the Iraqi Vice President, Adel Abed al-Mahdi, the British Prime Minister Tony Blair confirmed that no date has been set for the withdrawal of foreign troops from Iraq, stressing that it is more important to achieve progress in the political process than talking about the troops' withdrawal.
Right, well, can I welcome the Vice President of Iraq?
I would like to welcome the Vice President of Iraq and express my pleasure of receiving him. I would also like to thank him personally for his great efforts in Iraq during the past 2 years. Despite all these problems in Iraq, I am very sure that the political process will continue to proceed forward.
لم يفند بلير توقعات بعض المسؤولين العراقيين
Mr. Blair did not refute Iraqi official statements regarding the withdrawal of British troops from Iraq in the upcoming year. However, he left the door open for all possibilities, confirming that the withdrawal is tied up to the security and military situation on the ground. He added that our mission has changed from toppling the former regime of Saddam Hussein to restoring and maintaining security in Iraq. Britain, which has 8,000 troops in Iraq, does not have significant problems with Iraqi local residents, who are mainly Shiites in the south. In contrast to the U.S., London did not specify a timetable schedule for its troops' withdrawal from Iraq. The British government will not withdraw its forces until the Iraqi security forces and police are capable and able to handle their responsibility. To get the training and experiences needed to run the country after coalition forces leave, the Iraqi security forces are working in conjunction with the American forces in joint military offensive operations against armed groups' strongholds. However, the vulnerability of the Iraqi forces and their inability of defending the armed groups made the U.S. and Britain skeptical about transferring some of the security responsibilities over to the Iraqis anytime soon. In an interview with the British network ITV, the Iraqi president, Jalal Talabani, confirmed that the British forces will withdraw from Iraq by the end of 2006.
عن انسحاب متوقع للقوات البريطانية بنهاية 2006.
We do not want the British forces to stay in Iraq forever. I believe that by the beginning of next year, we will reach an agreement with the English government regarding the withdrawal of some British troops from Iraq by the end of 2006.
However, Talabani downplayed his statement that raised the expectations of many Iraqis. He stated that he was not the commander-in-chief for the British forces and therefore could not talk on their behalf. He also confirmed that if a British withdrawal takes place next year, it will be done gradually. Talabani was not the only Iraqi official who talked about British withdrawal from Iraq. Adel, Abed al-Mahdi, and Ahmad Shalab, both Shiite leaders, talked recently about the same subject.
The answer to the question, when will the United States withdraw its forces from Iraq, depends on doing the right thing. Having done so, the United States will withdraw its troops during 2006 without causing security breach or breakdown.
وإذا كان عام 2006 هو الموعد الذي تمنى المسؤولون العراقيون
Iraqi officials' wishful thinking is that the year 2006 will bring with it the beginning of foreign troops' withdrawal from Iraq. The Iraqi National Advisor, Muafiq al-Rubai, went even further by estimating the number of foreign soldiers who will withdraw from Iraq at 30,000 from a total of 160,000. Some critics cautioned that the talk about foreign troops' withdrawal is only a hoax and an election ad for the upcoming elections that will take place next month.
التي ستجرى الشهر القادم في العراق.
Hello and welcome. Lebanese prosecutor Ilyas Said questioned the two owners of a mobile phone store, which the UN team probing the assassination of former Prime Minister Rafah Hariri said played a role in the planning of the February 14th murder. Meanwhile, the international community continued its pressure on the Syrian regime to cooperate with the UN Commission if it wanted to avoid sanctions. May Fawaz has the latest developments.
The international inquiry into the assassination of former Prime Minister Rafah al-Hariri was revived as German prosecutor Detlef Melis returned to Beirut to advance the investigation. On the Lebanese front, prosecutor Ilyas Said interrogated yesterday Ayman Tarabai and Mustafa Mistour, the owners of the stores which sold cell phones and lines to the executioners of Hariri's assassination. In another development, military prosecutor Rashid Mizhir arrested Sheikh Hassan Mazloum, a Muslim cleric suspected of being implicated in the consecutive terrorist bombings in the aftermath of the February 14th explosion. Mizhir arrested Mazloom after confronting him with Ali Mrad, another suspect arrested for the same offense, which brings the number of suspects implicated in bombings which have rocked Lebanon to 7. On the international level, Syria has been subject to continuous pressure to cooperate with the International Commission probing Hariri's murder. French President Jacques Chirac called again on Syria to cooperate. Following talks with Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh, of which Syria was the highlight, Chirac reiterated the necessity for Damascus to cooperate with the International Commission. Presidential spokesman Jérôme Bonafont said that the French president confirmed that the unanimous actions of France and the international community were not under any circumstance directed against Syria or its regime. He said that such actions were taken so that justice could take its course regarding Hariri's assassination and so that Lebanon could become sovereign. This, he added, would materialize through the adoption of Resolution 1559. For her part, U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, who was in the region, told reporters following a meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the Palestinian territories that it was very important that Damascus cooperated, and if it refused to do so, she said, it would only be increasing its isolation. Rice stressed that Meli's investigation had to proceed with Syria's cooperation. In Cairo, the European Union's High Representative for External Affairs, Javier Solana, said yesterday that Syria was not cooperating and that it was imperative that it did.
Head of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, General Command Ahmed Jibril, threatened to respond to Future TV, Al-Mustaqbal Daily, and the Kuwaiti daily Al-Rai. Jibril did not specify the nature of these threats. According to Jibril, these media outlets attacked the Palestinians and accused them of terrorism. According to the Jordanian weekly Al-Majd, Jibril did not specify the nature of these threats in an interview with Kull Al-Arab Daily or where Future TV and the Kuwaiti Daily attacked the Palestinians. Jibril also accused MP Saad Hariri of including his name and the name of his party in the Melis report to pressure the disarmament of the Palestinian armed groups.
The Palestinian Authority today clinched a deal on the manning of the Gaza-Egypt border crossings from Rafah and Kerem Shalom. The long-awaited plan followed marathon talks through the night with Israeli and Palestinian officials and U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz calls the deal, quote, another phase in the framework of trust-building steps between Israel and the Palestinians. The border is scheduled to tentatively be open on November 25th. IBA's Dennis Sin brings us more in this report.
Workers at the Rafah crossing this morning moved into high gear to get the facility operating as soon as possible.
I'm pleased to be able to announce today that Israel and the Palestinian Authority have concluded an agreement on movement and access.
The agreement became a reality following an early morning meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz. Mofaz finally agreed that the Rafah crossing, which was the main sticking point, could be opened as a bilateral facility operated by the Palestinians and the Egyptians under the supervision of representatives from the European Union. Israel will be provided with real-time continuous video to monitor the border crossing.
This agreement is intended to give the Palestinian people freedom to move, to trade, to live ordinary lives. For the first time since 1967, Palestinians will gain control over entry and exit from their territory. This will be through an international crossing at Rafah, whose target opening date is November 25th.
Besides Rafah, the sides agreed that the Kani crossing will be opened permanently and expanded for the passage of a much greater volume of goods. A shuttle service will be established between Gaza and the West Bank to facilitate the movement of merchandise and persons between the two Palestinian areas. Israel will, as far as possible, allow the Palestinians free movement in the West Bank, and the building of a Gaza seaport can commence. There was no accord regarding the reconstruction of the Palestinian airport at Dahania in the southern Gaza Strip. Today's agreement ended months of wrangling between the two sides. However, it appears that neither party is satisfied with the outcome. The Palestinians said that Israel is continuing its so-called occupation by the limitations it's imposed. Israeli security sources warned, without Israeli hands-on involvement, the Rafah crossing will turn into a major transit point for Palestinian terrorists and their weapons. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Meanwhile, Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee Chairman Yuval Steinitz blasted the deal reached between Israel and the Palestinians. He said, quote, "The safe passage between Gaza and Judea and Samaria may lead to the transfer of anti-aircraft missiles and Qassam rocket technology to the West Bank." Steinitz's outrage was joined by former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other right-wing committee members who compared the agreement brokered by the Americans to an al-Qaeda port being established on New York's Hudson River.
The idea of giving the Palestinians a free port when they actually do not fight terror, when al-Qaeda is already moving into Gaza, when terror weapons are flowing freely from the Sinai, means that we could have much more destructive weaponry come into this terrorist state that Gaza has become. I think that's a mistake both for Israel's security and a mistake for American and Western security.
I think this is an absolute exaggeration. We don't have to worry. The safe passage will be inspected. There are enough modern devices, and we will be able to control it. And it will take time, it will take money and professional manpower and equipment, but it is absolutely possible.
Safe passage is rubbish. It means that it's a safe passage for terror. That's what it actually is, and that will leak terror to Judea and Samaria. And I can see, without a lot of imagination, a scenario where anti-aircraft weapons are launched to landing aircraft in the Ben Gurion airport.
Former Iranian President Mohammad Khatami, currently in Austria to attend the conference dubbed Islam in a Pluralistic World, confirmed Tuesday that Austrian Chancellor Wolfgang Schüssler has welcomed the idea to establish a center for dialogue among civilizations, which can get together intellectuals and well-wishers from East and the West.
The Conference on Islam in a Pluralistic World should seek pragmatic solutions to the ongoing problems instead of politicizing the issues. It was highly significant for Austria on the threshold of EU presidency to host the event. I hope this presidency by Austria will bring about further closeness between Muslim, Eastern and Western nations and help the West avoid misconceptions over practicing violence by Muslims on one hand and further construction of mutual respect and affinity between the two sides on the other, something that certain powers, especially the Zionists, fear. We should meanwhile seek peaceful means to see Muslims feel secure in Western countries and also eliminate misconceptions on Islam by the West. Efforts must also be made to voice Islam is not at all a religion to harbor terrorism and promote violence.
Iranian Foreign Ministry denounced as irresponsible and unfounded remarks made by Secretary General of the Persian Gulf Cooperation Council, Abdulrahman Al-Atiyah, who had accused Iran of interfering in Iraqi affairs. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hamid Reza Sifi said Tuesday the PGCC chief had better design and follow proper mechanisms for confronting terrorist measures which target Iraqi civilians.
The official spokesman for the French government, Jean-François Copper, announced that Paris decided to extend the state of emergency for an additional 3 months, which was put in place during the rioting in the suburbs. The spokesman said that the government is currently debating new legislation that allows for the extension of the state of emergency for more than 12 days for the first time in France's history. One of the main measures included in the state of emergency is allowing mayors to impose a curfew. Currently, curfews have been imposed in 4 cities. Despite the curfew, being placed a few days ago, the riots have continued and spread to large French cities. 3 weeks have passed since the crisis, but the Interior Minister, Nicolas Sarkozy, still insists on dealing with the riots as a security problem, which explains his decision to expel those involved. However, the Prime Minister, Dominique de Villepin, is trying to present social and economic solutions. The social and economic problems that led to the eruption of riots in the poor suburbs have entered into the third week. While the intensity of the riots has weakened, they have spread to more areas. The anger of what are called third-generation immigrants spread to large cities like Lyon, Toulouse, Strasbourg, Marseille, and others, even spreading outside France to Greece, Germany, and Belgium, though to a very limited extent. France has always been proud of its gracefulness, culture, and its three-part slogan for its revolution as it faces a storm of poverty and unemployment. 3 weeks later, the government still has not succeeded to quiet the rioters' anger. The government is internally divided between those advocating security solutions and those advocating political solutions that serve their political ambitions, especially the ambitions of the Interior Minister, Nicolas Sarkozy.
The youth who live in these neighborhoods want social assimilation. There are a minority of people who do not respect the law or values. It is the role of the Interior Minister to protect the security of citizens.
Sarkozy, who is looking for ways to reach the Élysée presidential palace, insists that only a security solution is needed for what he described as riffraffs. This is aimed to please the racists like Jean-Marie Le Pen and other right-wingers in order to gain their support in the presidential elections. Sarkozy wants to prevent his potential rival, de Villepin, from benefiting from the votes of Arab and African immigrants by blaming what is happening in the suburbs on the government of Chirac and de Villepin. According to French analysts, the greatest loss is France's sterling reputation, in addition to fears of economic losses, especially since the government that came to power had promised to solve the economic crisis and reduce the financial deficit by 3 percentage points. However, the eruption of the suburb crisis and the government's new plans to spend hundreds of millions of euros to develop the suburbs may prevent the government from achieving its promises. In addition, there have been losses in tourism. 30% of reservations scheduled in the coming months were cancelled. Most social scholars in Paris agree that this crisis is a failure of the French social economic system and that partial solutions will only serve as additional reasons for future crises.
هذا الموضوع مهم جدا وشغل الشارع السوري والعربي والعالمي في الآونة الأخيرة فضيحة محاولة شراء.
I would like to talk about a very important subject that has preoccupied the minds of many Syrians and Arabs. It is about the attempt to buy the testimony and conscience of Lu'ay Saqqa. We have with us Saqqa's attorney, Uthman Garahan, via satellite from Istanbul. Mr. Garahan, can you tell us exactly what happened in Istanbul prison where Mr. Saqqa is being detained, and how did they try to buy his testimony?
وكيف وقعت محاولة شراء ضمير هذا المواطن الموقوف في اسطنبول؟
Tamam. Yapılan teklifte kalmıştım. Oradan devam edeyim isterseniz.
كنت قد توقفت عند العرض الذي كان قد تقدموا به إليه.
Two people had visited my client at the prison and asked him to mention the name of a senior Syrian official as a suspect in the Hariri's death probe. Do you want me to name the Syrian official?
Ben şimdi o kişinin ismini söylememde bir mahsur var mı?
كان طلب هؤلاء الشخصين أن يلفظ اسم أحد المسؤولين كبار المسؤولين السوريين وهل ترون أي مانع؟
Yes, mention the name. Please tell us the details and the facts of the story.
وحقيقة ما جرى.
Bu kişiler aynen şöyle diyorlar. Alman savcı
المحقق الألباني
önünde Hariri suikastı ile ilgili olarak bir şahitlik yapacaksın ve hayatını kurtaracaksın. Şöyle ki
They told my client that he needs to testify in front of the German investigator Detlef Melhis regarding al-Hariri's assassination. If you testify, you will spare your life.
Şöyle ki Asif Şevket Hariri'nin öldürülmesinden bir süre önce üstlenmemizi istedi.
وعلى أن تقول بأن السيد
You have to say that the Syrian official, Asaf Shaukat, asked one of the Iraqi suicide bombers to take out the former Lebanese Prime Minister, Rafik al-Hariri.
أن يقوم بهذه المهمة. لقاء كنت قد أجريته في ألبانيا وإذا قلت ادعيت أيضا.
The two men told my client that they have information about a meeting he had in Germany and that if he would tell people that he met with Syrian officials, they will believe him.
Senden daha müsait bir tanıklık yapabilecek kimse bilmiyoruz.
إننا لا
mükemmel olarak bunu sen yapabilirsin diyor.
إننا لا نعرف شخصا آخر يمكن أن يدلي بشهادة هو أفضل منك في هذا الوضع. لا نعرف أحدا يمكن أن يدلي بشهادة أفضل منك.
We do not know anybody in a better position than you to do this. You are the only one who can give this kind of testimony.
İki cümle şahitlik karşılığında.
وفي مقابل هذه الشهادة أولا.
İlk önce kısa bir süre içinde Alman savcı milis buraya gelecek. Hemen seninle görüşecek.
After a short time, the international investigator Detlef Meles will come over here and interview you.
هنا بعد فترة وجيزة وسيلتقي معك.
Dahilinde hareket edecek ve seni bekleyecektir. Dilediğin gibi bir hayat sürmen için istediğin yere kavuşacaksın.
We made all the arrangements so you would no longer have to stay in prison and that an airplane is waiting for you in Istanbul to take you anywhere you want so you can have a luxurious life.
إلى مكان آخر حيث تعيش فيه حياة مرفهة.
هل عرضوا عليه فعلا مبلغ 10 ملايين دولار؟
Did they really offer Lu'ay Sakka the sum of $10 million?
Onu söyleyeceğim
سآتي على قول ذلك. نعم. الآن
şu anda sen bu şahitlik yapma hususunda karar verinceye kadar tereddütte bile kalsan bu aşamada dünyanın herhangi bir yerinde
I will speak about this.
Banka hesabına veya bizzat elden teslim şeklinde 10 milyon dolar vereceğiz. Bu sadece bir iyi niyet göstergesi. Bu işin başlangıcı diyorlar. Ve sen bunu
وجديتنا معك سنضع في حسابك.
In the beginning, we will do the following. First, to show our good intentions and that we are serious in cooperating with you, we will put $10 million anywhere in the world you want. We can put it in any bank or we can give this money to anyone you want us to give the money to.
Ve senin şahitliğinde problem bile çıksa biz bu parayı arayıp sormayacağız. Hiçbir hesap sormayacağız.
وحتى أنه لو ظهرت أي مشكلة في شهادتك فإننا لن نطالبك بهذا المبلغ.
Even if any kind of problem emerges concerning your testimony, we will not ask you to give us the money back. However, my defendant immediately refused this offer and told them that he can't accept it because that would violate his principles.
Bu kişiler şaşkın olmuşlar.
إلا أن موكلي لؤي السقا رفض هذا العرض على الفور وقال لهم بأن هذا العرض يتنافى مع مبادئي.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.